Hi everybody, Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget, hello. Another week.
Yes, I think we're a little surprised we still exist in a way, aren't we? But we do. We exist.
Well, I think it's been another week for the UK of everything really. We've had snow, we've had rain, we've had floods, and of course we've had never-ending numbers of people dying, people having the new variants of the disease. It's really been quite something, hasn't it? I would say perhaps a week of, I don't know, maybe a week of images is what I'm thinking, really, because for those of you who don't live in the UK, there's a new campaign, and I think probably a very effective one, in which we are being shown pictures, close-ups, aren't we, of faces of NHS staff and of people in a quite dreadful state.
Yeah, that's to encourage people to carry on with the lockdown and the distancing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I think
I think they actually saying, sorry, I was going to say, I think they actually say, look us in the eyes and tell us
That's
why,
right.
I found it pretty overwhelming, to be honest, and I think we've almost stopped looking
Well, it
at
depends
them,
how you're
really.
made,
It's
doesn't
almost
it?
too much, yeah.
It depends how your responses are made. I mean, I never ever watched the Passion film, not because I don't feel all the things I think that people feel when they watch it, but because, I mean, if someone said to me there's a film of your mother being tortured, I wouldn't go and watch it. I have enough dark images in my mind, and
Yeah.
I have profound sympathy for everybody who's going through this, and I'm going to do my very best to make sure that I do comply with these things. And
Yeah, and of course, there's loads of people at the moment with enough images in their mind and enough immediate memories to not need to watch it. But obviously, there are also some people seeing is believing, isn't it?
yeah, true.
But of course, this week we've also had our wonderful Captain Tom finally giving up. Finally, his death has happened. And we were talking, weren't we, about why this image of him walking with his walker up and down his garden, why it's meant quite so much to us as a country. I mean, we've had the whole nation out clapping him because Boris Johnson thought it was a good idea. And I suppose for me it was just that there he was, a good old soldier. He wasn't going to be beaten. He wasn't going to be worn down. He was going to keep going.
Well, the interesting thing I think about what he's done, which is quite phenomenal, is that he didn't do very much. Um, I mean, he decided he was going to walk around his garden and perhaps get some money for the National Health Service. But the wonderful thing about that is that he gave all that he had.
Yeah,
Not
he did.
not that he gave a bit of what he had, but that
No.
little bit he had was, in the end, quite extraordinarily productive.
Yes, it's
And
true.
when I thought about that, I remembered Jesus in the temple with the disciples and the woman putting the 2 coins in the dish. And of course, all the big important people around there would have said, "Well, that means nothing." And Jesus said, "Well, she'll always be remembered for this, and she's put more than the others into that dish."
Yeah.
And what Captain Tom did was he put all that he had, and the result of it was phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Maybe that lady in the temple, well, there'll be some cosmic worth of her two
Yeah.
coins. But for him, we've seen it. We
Well, he
can
was
believe.
99, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And a lot of people would feel, well, I'm past it now. I haven't got anything that I can really offer. And it isn't even the money, is it? It isn't even just the money. It was much more something that got into us watching him there. It made us smile, and it inspired one or two people who would never have thought they could do things. I mean, there's a little boy called Tobias, isn't there, who had cerebral palsy and can't walk much at all. And he's got a walker. And do you remember he was watching TV and saw Captain Tom on it and said,
Yeah.
he's like me.
That's right, yeah.
And as a result, bless his heart, 9 years old, unable to walk, unaided, he did a marathon over the month of June. And there's an even littler boy called Tony, who was only 5, an amputee, who's also done something incredible. Yes, they've raised money, but I remember Tobias's mum saying that the whole street came out every day to cheer him on. And this little man has gained so much self-confidence, so much belief in himself that he can do something. Quite extraordinary,
right.
really.
Wonderful little chap. We saw a recording of that this morning, didn't we?
Yeah. And I think it's when people met Jesus, the people who didn't think much of themselves, maybe they had a terrible illness, or maybe they just knew their lives had gone in a wrong direction. There's something about meeting Jesus, seeing him, having him look at them, that made them believe they could do so much more as well. I'm thinking of, the obvious ones, I suppose, are Matthew and Zacchaeus. And I've always felt that woman, the woman who we know as the woman taken in adultery, went away believing she could sin no more. Not that it was a command, but that he gave her that self-belief that she could do it.
Yeah, a lot of the people in the New Testament started with you're quite right, a small belief in themselves, but enough when they encountered him to be able to really go for it.
It's awful the way that we label people, though, isn't it? We talk about seeing people, but it's very hard to get past our label that is put on somebody. That poor woman. Yeah, she has no name. She's just the woman taken in adultery.
Do you think she'll introduce herself like that in heaven?
I don't know.
I'm the woman taken in adultery. But look, I had a whole life, I was much more than that. Yeah, images are important. I remember, I've created a new gospel called the Gospel According to Fidibus.
I understood you found it under a rock, Adrian.
That's right, and it was in English, which was helpful. But, I was imagining some of the disciples might have felt like this about their names, what they meant. So I'll read you a little extract from that. This is, I think you'll find it very uplifting. This is Fidibus chapter 24, verse 19. Judas, not Iscariot, and Thomas, also known as Didymus, cometh to Jesus as he eateth an piece of broiled fish after an lengthy day of work. Judas saith unto him, Master, sundry of us are not happy with our names. I myself, for instance, am weary of being negatively defined by being called Judas, not Iscariot. The thing is, Lord, that whensoever I am introduced to strangers, the other disciples, whom I love, of course, maketh an point of saying, Behold, Judas. Then, as all draw their breath in sharply, these same disciples add, Not Iscariot, and falleth about laughing. Could I not henceforth be known as something like Judas, the one who never betrayed anyone and says some rather interesting original things from time to time? And Thomas, also known as Didymus, saith, Oh, quick word before we depart, Lord. As thou art aware, I am Thomas, also known as Didymus, and Didymus, master. I soundeth like an stuffed toy, and very small, squishy, stuffed toy, Didymus. I soundeth like a... Jesus saith, Verily I hear what thou art saying, Thomas, and I can promise that in the age to come, most will remember you by a quite different name. Believest thou this will come to pass? Well, I doubt it. Anyway, I would like to finish my fish.
Oh, dear. It's true, isn't it? Doubting Thomas. That's the that's what we think of the poor guy. Yes.
Bit
and of course,
unfair, really.
he's he's been called a skeptic just because of that one time when he met Jesus and he couldn't believe that Jesus had risen until he was able to see it in order to believe it and touch it. And touch the wounds. And there are lots of people who need to see it, who are visual people, who need to see and need to touch and find it very, very hard to believe unless they do.
It just occurs to me, by the way, who would you get to play Thomas in a drama about doubting Thomas?
I don't know, but you're going to tell me.
I think you'd probably get Victor Meldrew, wouldn't you? Say, I do not believe it. I think that would work very well.
I don't know. I would have loved to be there. I would have loved to see Jesus' expression to Thomas because he knew Thomas. And I don't know, when he says, put your fingers in the wounds. I know he says, because you've seen me, you've believed. Blessed are those who haven't seen and yet believe. But he knew Thomas. I think he knew the person he was. He knew the fact that he would be braver than almost anybody else when he was asked to do so. I mean, you know, when he says he's going to Jerusalem, it's Thomas, isn't it, who says, let's go as well so we can die with him. So we can die with him.
Yeah.
You know, that he may be the sort of person who needs to see in order to believe, but he's also the person who will say what's there, what's in him. You know,
I think
straight out.
he certainly did say the things he thought. The other moment I remember is when Jesus was saying to the disciples, I must go and prepare mansions for you, and you know where I'm going, and you know the way. You know the way. And Thomas said, actually, we don't.
Yes.
Actually,
Yes.
we have no idea what the way is. And Jesus, did Jesus know he was going to say that?
No,
I don't know. And Jesus said, well, I'll tell you then, I'm it.
Yes.
I am the way.
Yeah.
I am the absolute central truth, and I am the life, and that is the way.
Yeah.
So Thomas earned a wonderful response for his honesty.
Yeah.
It was really kind
Maybe we need to change to
encapsulated for
brave old Thomas or honest old Thomas or
Honest
whatever.
old
Thomas who
Thomas.
saw it how it was, whatever.
Yeah.
It's so easy, isn't it, for us to, well, we've already said it really, to label somebody, to see something and assume that that's who they are, without really looking at the rounded picture of how they got there and what they are. I know there's loads of people now who feel pretty labelled. You know, there's a lot of vicars' wives we meet, aren't there? Or perhaps I ought to say vicars' spouses, who feel that they're constantly introduced as the vicar's whatever.
That's right.
Not very
A sort of
easy.
adjunct to the main person, yeah.
But I mean, this is a time, isn't it, where we do have to be a bit honest, because we, more than ever maybe, it's reinforced that we can't actually see Jesus. I mean, I think being in community, in churches, when you're together, it reinforces, and I know there are problems sometimes with church groups, but it can reinforce what we believe. It can give us the confidence about what we believe. And, you know, we need sometimes to be hugged, to be reassured that we're loved. We need to see people, to see their faces. We've already talked about the effect of having to wear a mask, haven't we? I don't think it means that we're skeptics. I think it means that we're human.
Looking back to teenage years when I was in a Christian youth group, I think a lot of us were postponing certainty because others seemed to be sure. And perhaps we hadn't.
You mean they were relying on their certainty?
Yeah, we were assuming that as time went by, you would acquire that certainty.
A sort of
that
osmosis,
sureness.
really. Yeah.
But in fact, during the lockdown and this long period of a kind of universal depression over a lot of things, I know a lot of Christians are looking at what they believe and thinking, where did I get that from? Is it real? Will it continue? Is it supporting me? And if you're honest about that, it can be very difficult. I mean, some people we've known had testimonies, and I'm remembering one man in particular. Something happened to him in 1956, which changed his life, and that's wonderful. I'm glad it did, but that is all he had to say about his faith, really, that happened. And I don't really want to say it's a stale testimony, except that my hope for all of us is that we find new perspectives, new ways of seeing this truth that is so important to us. And I don't want to prescribe it, because I can't say if you do this it will happen, or if you do that it will happen. But there's that yearning in us. Yeah. And I also think, and I think it's really important, that what's in our hearts is just as important as what's in our heads.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have the love and the yearning in their hearts and can't quite say it in their heads. And
I mean, you're
that's
not
really
saying, I know you're
important.
not saying that those things didn't matter. I mean, it's interesting if you think about the Old Testament right the way through. Moses would be saying, "Don't forget that God did this.
Yeah,
Don't forget
all the
about.
time.
Don't forget."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
don't forget about the Red Sea. Don't forget about the manna. Don't forget about. So we need those things, don't we? But it's a case of hanging on to them and not moving forward, which is what you said. And it is interesting because one of the first things that you wrote was all those years ago, over 30 years ago, when you were coming through that horrible breakdown, and you might not have remembered. I mean, I know, because I happen to be married to you, I know that
You happen to be married
yeah,
to me.
I mean, I was very close to you during those horrible times, and I know that your fear was that everything had kind of crumbled around you because you couldn't see Jesus anymore. You couldn't feel him. You couldn't. And then you wrote this thing that I'm so glad you wrote, because there it is. This is how you felt at that time.
Yeah, it is a reminder. It's called I Didn't Have to See You. I didn't have to see you in the night time there by the side of me. I knew it had to be you. I knew you loved the child inside of me. You smiled in the darkness. It seemed to blind and burn. But when my eyes were opened, I smiled in return, for you were there. I didn't have to hear you. In the silence, you were a part of me. I knew that I was near you. I knew your love was deep in the heart of me. I knew that you were saying our happiness has grown, for prayer is only friendship. You never were alone, for I was there. I didn't have to hold you. I was trusting, knowing your care for me. The secrets I had told you, knowing you would always be there for me. So let the darkness gather, and let the silence roll. The love that made you suffer is glowing in my soul. You are there.
The thing is, Adrian, could you still say it in the present? I mean, that's quite a challenge, isn't it?
Well,
I don't have to see you in the night time there by the side of me.
I think
I know it has to be you.
Over the last few years, I have reached that point where I can say that, thank God. I mean, I think I couldn't quite say that then. But when you write things in that form, you tidy them. I mean, that was my experience,
Yeah.
or that was the growing part of my experience. But it's taken years for something in me to relax back and say, you now actually don't need evidence. You don't need proof. You need what's inside you now. And I'm very, very grateful for that. I really am.
Yeah, and it's true. He does know the child inside all of us, doesn't he? You know, I mean, if we don't believe that, then we really are a bit lost. But I do believe it. I don't believe it just for me. I believe it for everyone. I believe he really does know what's going on inside. And the fact that we don't, I mean, we are very fragile. We easily, on the basis of how we feel about ourselves, make assumptions, don't we? I think I mentioned it ages ago, but one of the first times I went to the supermarket, there was a woman behind me. It was really early in the morning because it was the special time for elderly people. And she was so smart. And I looked at her and I thought, how do you manage to be that smart this early in the morning? I was looking my normal self. I was
Interesting.
I think I was just a mess, really. It was early in the morning and I'd plodded off to the supermarket. And then I just said something to her and just said hello or something. And she said, I haven't done this before. I don't know what to do. I'm really frightened. It was so extraordinary, you know, in that moment to realise this person was going out for the first time, going to a shop for the first time, was absolutely terrified and had probably actually got herself really smartly put together out of this fear, this going outness, this...
Yeah.
And in that moment, suddenly I saw the child inside her. And I hold on to the fact that Jesus sees the child inside of us. And he knows us like he knew Thomas. You know, and that however old we are and however frail we are, 99, Captain Tom was. Most people would say, I haven't got a lot I can offer.
Do you think that lady in the queue looked at you and thought, inside that woman, there is an amazingly dressed, well-prepared person?
No, I really don't. No, I really don't. But we do need Jesus' imagination, don't we, when we look at people?
Well, now you're quoting that great evangelical Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde, who, in De Profundis, his letter from prison, I found very interesting that he wrote about the imagination of Jesus. And he said that was one of the things that was different about him, that he looked at a child or thought or was told a child was dead and could see the child alive. And he looked at someone who was sitting by a pool, thought he can walk, I can see him walking. And that active, proactive, imaginative approach to life is very close to what spiritual life is, I think.
Yeah.
Just to wait for that view of what is possible.
Yeah.
And then you really will see something, and seeing will be believing, but hopefully by then you don't really need that. But it's wonderful when it happens. Yeah. So.
Well, it's been lovely to hear from some of you, and next week we'll try and share some of the things that you've been saying to us. But for now,
look after yourselves. Yeah. Look after yourselves. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.